still very dedicated in doing whatever it is they do in their communities, in their environment. Some of them are in politics, some of them are in private organizations, some of them are teaching school, some of them are professors, whatever. But mostly they're sharing and they're healthy mentally and I hope physically. Yes, sir.
Brother Jones?
Thank you. My name is Walter Jones. I'm from New York City.
Is that where you grew up, Walter?
Yeah, on the streets of New York in
All right.
Manhattan, in fact.
Different environment.
Yeah, I'm from New York all the way. You won the war. I mean, what is so awesome is that the movement that you were such a critical part of, you eliminated legal segregation. You opened the political system to voters and to leaders, and you won that war. And it seems to me that after that phase, we have lost the peace, that there has not been the next generation to carry through to how do we develop a program to empower inner city communities to take advantage of this. In fact, we have really opened the door and lots of other groups have come in and displaced African Americans because we didn't have a peace program. That's my...
The peace program?
A peace program.
Okay.
You know, once you accomplish those awesome goals. And my question to you is, if you could just sit down now and say, here's where I would start, the new movement. Where would you start it? In the churches, with community organizations, with young people, with older people who have seen more and seen the cycles? Is there a place that you think that the next phase of the movement should start and where that energy could come from?
I don't think about a movement per se. Because like I said before, I think it was a phenomenon, an exception to a situation. I think it's something you can't define, you can't arrange, you can't make it occur. It'll happen or it won't. But I see people still struggling. I see people still working. What happens because it's not a movement and people are not in the street, the press doesn't write about it. So it's not known. And so everybody thinks that nobody else is doing anything. But I don't think that that's true. And maybe what those people who are doing things need to do is find a better way to share what it is that they're doing and why they're doing it. And that would give people more ideas about how to organize their environments, how to hook up with people in different countries, different nations, different situations. Highlander does some of that. ITC does some of that. Interdenominational Theological Seminary in Atlanta, the Conference Center. There are people all over trying to bring people together. Vincent and Marie, I remember 10 years ago at Pendle Hill, bringing people together. 9 days of dialogue. I never talked, and I'm sure the other people never talked that much to anybody. You know, we had Bob Moses, Ann Braden. We had people from the movement. We had young people who'd never been in the movement. And we had people who were doing other kinds of things. And they came together under Vincent and Rosemarie's direction to dialogue about sharing information, about who's doing what, about what you thought about what it is you did and why you did it that way. And I think, so we need more dialogue. And like, a lot of people don't think anything is happening because they don't see this charismatic figure, as Shakobi said. But don't wait to see anybody, because you can't wait on the media to bring you the news. They're not going to bring you the news that you want, so you have to find other ways to get it. You can't just read one newspaper and expect them to tell you everything, because it's not possible. You have to look at a variety of situations, varieties of periodicals, varieties of information, talk to varieties of people to see what's going on. And you'll find, I think, that there are people who are doing impressive things. It's just not popular. It's just not newsworthy. But if they kill somebody or they went in the street and laid down in front of cars, then that would be newsworthy. But the thing that irritates me is that because the media, we become so dependent upon that we wait for them to bring us the information, we don't realize that the information is there for us to go get. They cannot do our job for us. They're not going to bring us what we need. In fact, they're going to bring us the opposite of what we need. And so we will think, so if we don't have that charismatic leader, if we had a charismatic leader, everybody would know what that person was doing, but they wouldn't know what the organization was doing. So I don't think we really need a charismatic leader, although it can be a pivotal point to get people to join. It's like a magnet. Because I learned from charisma, I learned what charisma was when I met Dr. King. I remember what charisma was when I met Kwame Ture or Stokely Carmichael, because there are people who are charismatic, and that means they just draw you to them. But I say still, so what? When they die, you know, you still got to go on and do what you're doing. So charisma be damned, and let's go forward. And we all have something to offer if we have a thought on it. Yes, sir. The gentleman back there, and then the gentleman in the yellow shirt, and then Jacoby.
Would you stand?
My name is Jeffrey Amos Scott. I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri.
All right.
That's where I'm from originally. My question is, what kinds of challenges and difficulties have you dealt with and perhaps overcome in trying to be a mentor to young activists who are coming up nowadays? Something on my mind a lot, something I'm trying to work on, figure out how to do.
Well, I haven't had much association with young activists per se in their own organizational systems. I have had association through classes at the colleges and speaking to grad and undergrad students and talking about struggle and trying to share my involvement and what it means that you don't have to be a particular kind of person from a particular kind of place that does a particular kind of thing. You could skydive, but you can be strong in what it is you believe, and you can fight for freedom, and you can fight against injustice. And I try to always talk about the fact that don't just look at us who are up on the podium or who are in the press. Look and learn about what organizing is. The day-to-day situation, it's not glamorous, it's not romantic, it's just work and it's effort. And so you find something that interests you and turns you on and makes sense to you. You know, I like to see more young people dealing with not just black people going to jail so often, but how we can get these young men to become wiser about the system and how to manipulate the system and how to not get caught up in the traps that the system sets for you. I'd like to see some of that going on. I haven't had any problems. I've had a lot of assistance. I haven't had any perils. I have a good life in terms I'm healthy, I feel good. So as far as I'm concerned, anything else is second. Because the first things are that I have these other things first. And so there'll be the negatives, there'll be some bad things, but to me they're insignificant because I know I can overcome them. But to show young people that it's not about looking for one person. You are the person. Yeah.
That seems to be really true.
Okay.
That's the one truth I'm trying to hold on to.
Okay. I really seriously believe that, you know. And you're not the one person by yourself, obviously, but connected up with other people. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Sir?
Yes, my name is Robert Benton. I was raised in Dover, Delaware. You know, I really appreciate all the comments that you have made. You know, I've been scribbling away, hoping I can capture them all. But the question I wanted to ask you, you spoke about when you went down to do the work, you were not scared. I would have been, scared to death. How did you do that? How were you able to go to work each and every day, just knowing that there could be a bomb, or that there could be guns going off?
Okay.
How did you do that? What was the bedrock that you had in order to get the courage, to do that?
My inner spirit says to me that I will live a long, healthy life and that I will live a happy life. And I believe my inner spirit. And I believe really that nothing would happen to me, per se. But I also thought about the realities of it, and that is, okay, the real situation is you're in a dangerous environment. But somebody has to do the work. You're going to suffer the injustices. The injustices are worse than not participating in this. So do you allow this, you're just going to live a life just because you can get away with it? You're going to party hardy and just hang out just because you can do it? Or do you think about more than just yourself, because you're not out here by yourself? Things don't just affect you. They affect you and people you're involved with. So if you don't think bigger than yourself, how do you get anything done? And sometimes you just have to take a chance. I remember one time being scared for real, though, and that was, because there were a couple times I was really scared, but I wasn't scared to go there and do the work, but there were a couple times I was scared while I was there. And one situation was, I had moved to the Atlanta office, to our national headquarters, and Jose Williams used to have these night marches, which made no sense. Right?
We had one in Selma.
They had many in Selma. They had night marches, and we couldn't understand. We were trying to say, why are you having these night marches? There's no press, there's no lights. People get annihilated. You can't tell who killed them. It just, whatever it was. But anyway, they were planning on having this night march, and it was like, I think it was 1996, or I'm pretty sure it was. And it was New Year's Eve of, might be New Year's Eve of 95. I mean, of 65, I'm sorry. And I was in Atlanta, and we were at a party, a New Year's Eve party. And I got a call saying, look, we need you to come to Selma to man the two-way radio. SCLC is talking about having a night march, and we don't have anybody, we don't want them to have it, and we're scared. We want somebody to come here and do this radio thing and watch the street. So somebody drove me from Atlanta to Selma. I entered Selma at night. I went into the office, went upstairs, and manned the two-way radio on the telephone. And I had my post at the window. And meantime, this guy, who was a radio DJ out of, I think, Montgomery or Birmingham, he had come by. We were doing well. And so I let him in, because somebody told him I was there, and he came by. Lights were off. I let him in. Meantime, I'm trying to do my job, and this man's trying to rape me. So we're fighting in the office, and I'm trying to fight him so I can look out the window. And I saw a bunch of white men in brown uniforms with guns on their shoulders walking down the middle of the street at night. And when I'm struggling with this person, and I look again, they all disappeared. And they apparently had gone into the bushes near the houses on the street, and we're going to wait for these marchers to come by. So I was able to deal with this human being who was trying to assault me, get him out of there, and make a call to Brown's Chapel where the meeting was being held, and warn them, please, do not have this march. And they called the march off. Okay? That was the night I was scared, because I thought people were going to really get killed. Another time, we were coming from, it was after the march to Montgomery, and Stokely and a couple other people and myself were in a car, and we heard about Mrs. Louiso being killed, and the young man who was in the car with the Klan, or whoever shot her, didn't know he was in there. He hid on the floor under the dashboard area, and so they didn't see him, and so they didn't kill him. So we decided we needed to get back to Selma, because we didn't know what was going to jump off there. So we got in this car, and we drove from Montgomery to Selma, and we didn't see another car on the highway. The only thing we saw on the side of the road was a couple of cars. There was some distance that were vacant, and the doors were open. And we didn't have gun, toothpick, knife, anything. And we felt that we didn't know if we were going to be able to make it to Selma. And those were 2 times I was really scared. But for the most part, I didn't have that fear because I felt I had a job to do. And I felt that if what happened to Jimmy Lee Jackson, what happened to Sammy Young, what happened to some other people happened to me, so be it. That's the chance you take. Jacoby?
I know that this is supposed to be the question time, but
You had a comment?
I would just like to give you, if I can, gratitude, because in my life I never had any African American like involvement. Well, I had an adoptive grandmother, but she died, so it's always hard for me to get where I come from. And a lot of time on the streets, you know, it's kind of hard to just be like, you know, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So I just want to tell you thank you for, one, for sharing yourself with me, because, I mean, I don't know where I would have get it. I mean, I don't know how I came to this point here. I mean, I just have some, that's another personal conversation that me and you could talk about. But I just want to say thank you for,
Thank you. I appreciate
for giving me the opportunity to learn. I mean, if it wasn't for movements such as what you did, I mean, I wouldn't have the acknowledgement or the knowledge that I have now. So I want to tell you that I appreciate that, and then I hope that, I don't know, that I can keep in touch with you so I can get my other half that I need.
Okay.
Because this is something
We can
that I
take care
need.
of that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Are there others who want to raise questions, raise praise, sing songs? Sandy?
I'm Sandy Blake, and I just wanted to say to you
Sandy?
to be careful. I grew up in western Kansas. Be careful what you say about charisma. I don't know if it's the lights, but you have such an intense sparkle in your eyes. It really is energizing back here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Shamala, over here.
My name is Lucas Shamala. I'm from Kenya. Western Kenya is where I was born and raised. And I am just very humbled to sit here and listen to you, the kind of wisdom that you exude in what you are saying, and how touching. You are very kind of, you are not like, you don't look very charismatic, yet I think you are very charismatic.
Okay.
Yeah, you look just like very humble, but you are very powerful.
I feel very humble.
And that is very humbling.
Thank
and
you.
Just the kind of wisdom that you have gathered and how you have gone about in your life, it's very inspiring.
I appreciate
So
it.
I feel very fortunate that I'm in your presence. I have one question. You talked about working with the radio, the media. And as I hope, an aspiring activist, what will you give me as an advice in terms of the role of the media in fostering social change?
I think that people have to be more busy about creating their own media to share their own ideas, because nobody else is going to do it. Because if it's not bringing money, and if it's not big business, and big business, we understand, has to function. It has a role also. But we have to define what our role is going to be. And oftentimes I found that you talk to the media and they'll listen, you think you're sharing, and they'll use 2 sentences out of an hour. And so you have no information. And a lot of times they'll twist situations and you have less information because they gave you the wrong information. So I think people you have to read between the lines when you're reading the mass media. You have to look at the variety of situations that come about and how they deal with it. I don't deal with it right or left. I deal with it whether it makes sense or not. And for example, in Atlanta, I just stopped serving, doing a radio show. I did 26 years. We created a radio station because we felt we had to have our own media. Nobody else was going to allow us to bring on the kind of people we would have right in this room to talk about the concerns and the interests. And my show was 2 hours. You come, and I did very little talking because I felt the show was about the person I brought to the air and not about me, and give them a chance to share, and hoping that their sharing would be information system for other people, let people know that there are people doing things all over the country, but they don't have access to who those people are. So I said, my little way, I can have them on my little show. But there were other people who also felt the same way. So we built our own radio station. It's called WRFG FM, 89.3 FM in Atlanta. We've been on the air, I think, 28 years. I worked to help put it together, and then I did a show for 26 years. There were other people who did more radical programs. We had roster programs. We had revolutionary programs. And people could come on, and they could be pro or con, whatever it was they wanted to talk about, and they had the right to say whatever it is they wanted to say. That was just one little tiny, tiny thing, okay? But it was important for us. Now, the people that started that radio station were white and black people, but all of them had been involved in some kind of movement, struggle, organizing effort. So they came together sort of on the same page. Now, we didn't always agree on the same things, but that's normal and natural as far as I'm concerned. But we were able to agree enough to get the station started, and we were able to agree enough to maintain that station for this period of time, and it's still functioning. And that's just one aspect. And so I think we need to think more about what is it we can create rather than somebody creating for us, and because then we can control it. But then also in your bylaws, when you're setting up a situation, be very careful and about what you want that new thing you're creating to be about. And also don't be so rigid, because as you get older, sometimes you get a little more rigid. Young people come in, they want to do something different. You have to leave some space in there where things can be broadened or expanded, or other people's concepts, because you don't have it all and you don't know it all, so don't bring it all. Leave some for somebody else. That make sense?
Charlene?
Charlene Chapman again, Wilmington, Delaware.
Yes,
did you have a chance to meet and personally dialogue with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King? And did you also meet Fannie Lou Hamer? And if so, with both of those parties, what did you learn, and what can you inspire us with?
I met Mrs. Hamer, but I never really dialogued with her. When I came in, I never worked in Mississippi. I think if I had worked in Mississippi, I would have known the people of Mississippi better. I happen to know people out of Alabama and Georgia more so than that. But I thought Mrs. Hamer, the people that in SNCC that I knew, that knew her, she was fantastic. She was just a wonderful, strong human being. She had a great spirit. She was a very religious person. She operated in the church. She sang, but she was an organizer. And she came, you know, the movement, quote unquote, sort of supposedly came to her, but the people of Mississippi were performing, and the people from the North came south to cooperate and work with the people of the South. Mrs. Hamer was somebody that I never heard anybody say anything negative about, male or female, in SNCC that I know about, and they probably would have hurt somebody if they said something about her. Dr. King, we never had discourses. I met him, I knew him. We had a few little minute conversations, but I don't say I knew Dr. King or he was a friend of mine, but I knew him and I met him, and I was in his environment, and he was a very nice person. I think, and this is something Vincent and I talked about earlier, but I sincerely think that he was much more regular and down to earth than it appeared that he was. I think a lot of the people around him who were in his leadership and his lieutenants, as somebody said, were more snobbish and more stymied and more ministerial in their attitudes. But I think because he was a minister also, so I'm not putting down all ministers. But, and Lafayette, Bernard Lafayette was a minister. There was a whole lot of varieties of ministers. It was just this particular group that was so officious, because there were people who were ministers who were in SNCC, but they were about the business at hand. They weren't about their egos, and that was important. And I really do think Dr. King was a very regular kind of person. He was very nice, very pleasant person. But I think that I wish he'd had more radical lieutenants.
Fay, I'd like to make a comment and ask a question. I've got mine with me. Okay, thank you very much. First, about this question that I see my brother Robert keep getting red in the face on about ministers. Part A to that comment that I want to make. You need to know that more than half of the students at ILF are women.
There'll be a change.
Yes, a change.
Big change.
Very important change. And that leads me to the second point, second part of my point. It was that movement, the Bernard Lees, the Bernard Lafayettes, the Martin Kings, the C.T. Vivians, all these kind of crazy men, the Fred Shuttlesworths, because there were no women ministers there at that time in the situation, but it was those magnificently crazy men who began to change this country's understanding of what a minister is and what a minister does. As a matter of fact, if you look at something as simple as the applications to seminary in that period, you see a real rise in that period, because more and more people were saying, oh, that's what a minister is, huh? Well, let me try that.
They can be different.
Yes, and so this has been a changing kind of situation. You saw some of the best and some of the worst in the situation. I'm so glad you could cheer both the best and the worst. The other thing that I want to ask was, you said that because you weren't in Mississippi, you didn't really know Mrs. Hamer.
That I hadn't met her.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But you were in Alabama. Who are a few of the local people there who were powerful for you in your life?
Well, I'll speak on one lady, who Mrs. Bolden, who, what's her name, Bolden? Boynton. And she was sort of not upper class, but she had a little more income than most people in Selma, and she would be called well-to-do among the black community, but she was a fighter. And I remember she would be involved in the marches, and she's the one that hit Sheriff Jim Clark, because he was trying to hit her with his billy club, and she was a big woman, she was very strong, and she grabbed his hand and she hit him with his billy club, you know, and that was impressive to me.
Part of the women in your life, huh?
Yes, sir.
No, try to hold it just a moment. Let her finish. Let her finish her story, okay? Let her finish her story.
Okay.
Go ahead, Fay.
But that's really.
Who else was there that you wouldn't?
I really don't know the names of the people any longer, because there was a young lady who used to work with SNCC who was there, and I can't even remember her name. She used to stay at the SNCC Freedom House with us all the time. But I don't really know the names any longer.
Did you live with anybody when you were there?
We lived in the Freedom House.
You lived in the
This
Freedom
cold, cold Freedom House. I didn't know what cold was until I went to Selma. And I'm from Pennsylvania. But people were living in houses that didn't have any insulation. And so when the heat was on, the heat just rose up and out, up and out. And so we'd be up at 3 o'clock in the morning. We used to sleep together with our clothes on, the men and the women. And when it got so cold, we just put all our clothes on, our hats, our mittens, our gloves, our scarves, our socks, and get in bed and go to bed and go to sleep, trying to keep warm. But it wasn't really something that you dwelled on a lot. It was just something that it was just there. You just did it.
Yes. Strider, would you like to say what you were going to say now?
Yes. Amelia Amelia Boynton, who was, upper class as Afro-American person
compared
could be
to,
at
yeah.
that time in the Deep South, was very powerful in the movement. But it was not she who slugged Sheriff
Who was
Carr. It was Annie Lee Cooper.
Was it Annie Lee?
Annie Lee, domestic maid. She was 53 years old.
Okay.
She was powerful. I love that woman. I stayed with her
Okay,
when
well,
I
now
go to
I've been
Selma's
corrected.
several
right.
times. But she had grown up in Kentucky and was involved in the coal mine wars in Kentucky in the 20s. So she
has
already
vast
had heart
experience.
from the
Yeah.
struggle, and she just, one day she wasn't going to take it. And
Well,
she
wasn't gonna let
decked
that
Jim
man hit
Clark.
her.
But yeah, there were the local people that was the movement. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Stradlin.
Thank you.
Where else do we have a hand over here?